Brain dead by then. Okay, awesome. We're live. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Already Chats. This episode is sponsored by absolutely nobody because we're a bunch of miscreants and no one wants to give us money. Today, I'm here once again with Christian, and we're going to discuss postmodernism and take it from there. So,
With Aiden.
with Aiden, go on, brother. There you go. So where would you like to start? What aspects would you like to begin discussing?
I think just a general outline on what's happening in the world and how that reflects how postmodern philosophy influences the way of thinking and everything. Literally, just some.
Okay, wonderful.
I know
So,
what you see, what I see.
yeah, so because you're doing mostly sort of study of literature and classical cultures through that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
How are you seeing postmodernism affecting your like sort of field and that sort of topic as a whole?
Well, in terms of literature, because of what postmodern philosophy states, that supposedly all of the narratives have been explored and used. That there's nothing really new that you can invent that could shape the the world of art in general. Uh, that doesn't go only for literature, but art in general. That's what people think, and because they think that way, what I've noticed is that produces a line of thought that makes you kind of not even try to get out of the boundaries that you've been set, that somebody has set upon you, and that you've accepted
Mm-hmm.
without even thinking
So sort of,
too much.
it almost produces like the antithesis of what it claims to do. Because I like when I
Pretty
was reading,
much, yeah.
yeah, when I was reading, oh God, what was his Derrida? A lot of what he was going for was we must liberate people from these narratives and from all these things and liberate people from their collective identities. A lot of this stuff, and it's ended up becoming just its own like lockdown totalitarian identity
Yeah,
in its own self. It denies people the
exactly.
ability to see that. Okay, that's interesting then. Because when it comes to literature and this sort of literature as like a canon of culture, interpretation is
Hmm.
key, and literary well, what's the word? Context. Like literally, like it's very difficult to read Tolstoy without having the context of Russia of the time and also Europe of the time and
Mm,
etc. etc.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
So it
So,
tears that heritage and that history away from people. Yeah.
well, I'm not so sure about that. I haven't noticed people like not approaching literature from a context. What I was saying was that, but maybe you could clear that out a bit for me after I finish my thought. What I was saying is just that writers in general, they've become they don't bring anything new to the table, and they sort of started to employ uh, like philistinic tactics in terms of attracting the consumer,
Sort of
because
hedonist.
well, sort of, yeah. So the aesthetic is very bourgeois and hedonistic, because people like to imagine that life where you don't have to think about how much money you have in your wallet, and I don't know, swimming on the beach and doing all sorts of shit like that.
Mm.
I mean, they find it attractive, and so it works. um, but yeah, outside of that, it's just what do I want to say? Um, yeah, it's I guess it's kind of like that.
You're talking primarily about authors. I was talking more about the interpretation and the reading of literature. So I was when I
Oh,
was
right.
in
Okay.
that, I was sort of saying, well, I was listening to someone what they were either talking about Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they were describing it as being essentially just the tale of a white man attempting to dominate everybody else around him and then get all this power and exploit people. And it's like, Jesus Christ, my man! Like, and that is the context from which the literature is being read, as opposed to the context of like Russia of the
If
time.
Tolstoy heard that, he would be, like we
Yeah.
say in Russian, he would be shaking and turning around in his grave, like, "What the fuck are you talking about me?"
It's serious. It's a real thing though, because like not a lot of people know that Tolstoy created his own like Christian philosophy that influenced Gandhi and was like predicated on loving everybody and like saving everyone. It's like, oh man, it's quite.
Yeah, it was a pretty. Yeah, Tolstoy is an amazing thinker in terms of that, in
Mm.
terms of his philosophy on Christianity, and it really shaped my way of viewing Christianity as well.
Oh, interesting. I have to say, it probably did contribute a lot to the way that I saw it. But Jung was probably my primary influencer for like the understanding of Christianity. But anyway, not to get too into that. We'll save that for another one. Um, so I honestly have not read a single like fiction work from a postmodern author. Not at all. I don't read like modern literature at all. So
I don't read too much of it either, but some of the authors can be pretty good, like most definitely, because uh, I don't think, and I don't like to think that all postmodernists are like inherently evil.
of
I
course,
think they ask the right questions, but I don't think that they stick to those questions truly.
hmm
Like
it's more
they
the
have the intellectually um, grasping the problem, but they don't have the right inequalities to approach it in an adequate way.
it's
Because
much more about
clearly,
the
like
motives than the actual tool of
what?
like thought. It's much more about the motives than the tool of thought itself.
Mm,
Like the postmodern sort of understanding that there is an infinite amount of ways to analyze anything. That's fundamentally true.
right.
That's not wrong. But when
Yeah.
you use that to then dismantle somebody's identity and then force onto them your identity or whatever like whatever narrative it is you're trying to um, spread, then it becomes like a force for evil. And it was quite a powerful one as such, but it's not like the ideology itself is inherently well, it is, that is a flaw, you know. But it's not that anybody undertaking that or coming to that realization is inherently wrong, inherently evil. It's as a fundamental truth at its core. It's just misused.
Hmm.
You know, that's how I see it, at least, anyway. But I think that there is a
Well,
validity in narrative that is denied by the postmodernist
yeah,
doctrine.
that's true. I mean that I think that's pretty self-evident as well. Well,
Mm-hmm.
not for some, obviously, but if you've listened to lectures of Jordan Peterson, then you most definitely have come across that point of view quite a few times. And yeah, that's the that's pretty much one of the main issues with postmodernism is that they for some reason they assume that uh, with an infinite amount of interpretations, that means that there's no viable interpretation, that there's no legitimate one that you can stick up to in terms of particular of any kind of discourse.
Mm-hmm.
Silly, which is not only absurd because that basically makes anything that you say just a cloud. It makes you a cloud as well. Have any position in life, that means that you're just a cloud drifting away in space, and you have no idea what's going on and
You are a
what the
cloud
world around you is.
in the
And
void.
I think that is the force that uh, that causes the nebulization of that the politically correct people try to attempt, instead of debating people, instead of arguing.
Hmm.
They just try to nebulize everything.
Hmm. Well, I think last time we discussed a little bit of the way in which, as as a human being, as an integrated person, everything you do will to a certain degree benefit you. And then once you have that sort of understanding, that
Well, that's if you're integrated, right?
well, as a biological entity, it's like when you separate your like sort of intellect from who you are as an individual, and you go, I'm just going to be like a universalist. I'm just going to see everything as having universal value. That
Mhm.
then that's like the phenomena of disintegration of personality. But when you operate as a relatively integrated individual, which I think we can grant that status to most people, um,
Mhm.
you will be operating primarily for self-interest, and you won't realize that in a lot of cases. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone the other day.
You won't realize it if you don't have the capacity for self-reflection.
Yes, yeah, I think that's quite important as well. But I was talking to somebody, and it looked to me like he was being quite manipulative of somebody by being really nice to them. And he's like, "Oh, but if I'm really nice to them, then they're going to be nice back to me." It's like, yeah, that's how it works. That's still manipulation. It's like,
Yeah.
but it's not. But it's not. It's like, well, it is. But there's nothing wrong with that. Like, please, don't, like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Like, you use.
When I was a kid, I would ponder on that paradox a lot when I would think about Christianity. Well, I mean, obviously, I didn't have a very deep understanding of Christianity, so I was like thinking like, I know that doing something good is good, but why is it that always when I think about it, I'm thinking of getting some benefit for myself? Is that good? Does that make me truly virtuous? I was thinking about this like when I was 7 or 8 already, and it really troubled me, and that's what stopped me like from uh like sinking in deep into any kind of religion, I guess.
Mm. But I think for me, and this is something that is lifted right out of one of Jordan Peterson's lectures. I can't remember which ones precisely, but I think it's probably a sentiment that he reiterates throughout. That the ideal pattern of being is that which is best for you and best for everybody around you and best for your children and best for their children from like a
That's basically Immanuel Kant.
yeah. There you go then. So that was that like Kant's imperative, whatever it is. I don't know. I was not a big fan of Kant. I got like halfway through one of his pieces and was a bit, that German idealism. Yeah, but I do think that Christianity is fundamentally correct in that. But when like you get that observation from the postmodernists, that will lead directly into the claim that any evidence you provide, any science that you have, is only there to maintain the status quo, which benefits your identity. And any interpretation that you use or any narrative you construct is only there for this. And that's true, but it's not true in an individual sense. It's true in a collected sense. It's true your narrative serves you as a group. It doesn't serve you as an individual. Just, you'll notice that people don't live up to ideals. Out of a group of 10,000 people, you'll get maybe one person that lives up to an ideal. And to
Mhm.
everybody else, that ideal will be oppressive. You know, you're never going to have that body shape or that type of personality or that intellect. And just biologically, it's not going to happen to you. Yet, being embedded within that narrative still is better than everybody sort of shattering and having their own narratives, which is what's happening at the moment.
Having what narratives?
Having their own like personal narratives.
Oh, well, that's schizophrenia,
It,
pretty much.
it is. It really is. It's like schizophrenia of. It's like a sort of a collective pathology, like a collective
Yeah.
schizophrenia. Everybody starts
Well,
embodying
for
this.
the collective, it's not a pathology. For the collective, well, because it's bigger than those that don't have this pathology. Like for it, it's the other way around. It's upside down.
That's true. That's a very interesting one. Is then what gets categorized as normative or normal, and non-pathological, and that
Yeah,
is a
because
dangerous
and that
position.
gets dangerous. That gets really dangerous, and that's what's happening with like the PC movement in America.
Yeah, I see that 100%, and I see with again, to go back to Foucault, um, I see this sort of it's in Foucault's work on mental health and mental asylums. I think we spoke on this before as well. He declared that all mental health categories and or categories of mental illness are just made up by society. They're not real. It's like, well, yeah, of course, because all linguistic things are constructs of like obviously, but that does not mean that somebody who is hallucinating something that isn't there is not genuinely pathological in their like actual like neurochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the very danger, and that's I think is exactly what's now happening to societies as a whole. It was initially done what the postmodernists attempted to do to well, Foucault's like in particular to the institution of psychiatry and mental health, to say that well, really, there's no such thing that is normative. This is a made up idea. All these people are just as mentally healthy as you are, and it's only because you consider yourself to be normal that you're doing this. And it is a very dangerous thing to walk down, because from the position of there is no hierarchy of value, from the position that you don't believe in that, that's true. Because if you don't have an ideal for what a healthy human being is, then there is no such thing as an unhealthy person. There's no such thing as someone who doesn't meet the ideal. It's like Cain and Abel, huh? You kill the ideal because you can't live up to it. Very dangerous.
I don't think of it that way actually, but yeah, that's true, and that's, to be honest, that's what I'm. Well, I can't say I'm afraid of it. To be honest, well, because of my uh, um, esoteric views on the world. Esoteric, not as in abstruse, but I mean as yeah, you get it.
I know, but you're gonna have to explain it anyway.
Okay, esoteric as in influenced by occult occult and religious disciplines, like, and philosophies. Yeah, because of that, I don't like. I'm not afraid of death, and I'm not afraid of the world like going to pieces, as well, and well, the aspect of fear is actually quite interesting. I'll go to that a bit later if you want.
Yeah.
If you
In fact,
because
I
it's
actually
like,
really need to pee, so if you want to just talk about fear for a little bit, that would work really well.
okay, by remind me what what you stopped at, what part you stopped at. So,
Oh,
I want to say something else.
at the the pathology and the concept that there is nothing which is normal. And
Right.
for the group, when the group becomes pathological and over half the group is in that pathology is no longer a pathology, it's now normal. And it's us that are
Right.
pathological. Yeah, I think that was it. Anyway, I really need to pee. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no worries. I want to say something else. Anyway, well, since I got sidetracked into fear, well, the thing is, when you attain a sort of, it's really hard to explain, and it's been difficult to do so quite often with people that haven't had psychedelic or religious experience. But when you even when you feel for a little bit the transcendental reality, and it is a reality because you, like, if you've developed a strong ego, and if you have the capacity for self-reflection and the intellectual background to analyze what is happening in such an experience, you can differentiate the hallucinations from the real experience. And moreover, after such an experience, it's like, well, because I had a psychedelic experience, it was really strong, but for a brief moment, and then it got transferred to well, I mean, it didn't get transferred. It stayed. It stayed, but in a sort of slightly suppressed state. so that whenever I had the whenever I decided to, I could pull it out of myself. I could enhance it and sort of start seeing and feeling it again. So, and essentially, it not only did it confirm all of which I've no, not only did the um, literature that I've read afterwards, like the sacral and ancient literature and the esoteric literature, not only did it confirm everything that I've experienced, but uh, because of not simply knowing, but knowing that you're knowing, it gave me a deep understanding of that, and suddenly you just realize that consciousness is immortal, just like that. I don't know how, but like you just understand. Just when you achieve that supreme consciousness, and when you get back to the average consciousness, something has changed. It's like a twitch. Like the mechanism is completely different, and you understand that it's it's not gonna die. It's
You
it's
got a question from the chat. Just what substance did you use to reach the psychedelic experience, or was it like a natural meditative state?
well, the thing is, well, initially it was acid, but then yeah, but then it didn't matter. Like
Yeah.
then I had well, it was back when I was on drugs. Like I don't do drugs anymore. I don't need it. It's not interesting. Apart from psychedelics, of course, but I don't consider them drugs, because drugs, like the word drugs, it imposes a negative connotation, which means something that is bad for your health. That's what usually people mean when they say it. They don't mean that some substance that is banned in this country. That's not what they're saying when they say drugs.
Yeah.
So, and psychedelics in that respect, they're not drugs. They are banned. They're, in the legal sense of the word, in the legal meaning of the word, they're drugs.
I agree
But
with you. Please
yeah,
continue.
but yeah, first it was acid. Then I didn't. I mean, I wasn't very aware of what wasn't aware as I am now, at least. So I kept like doing drugs, and I was in this kind of, like, as Evel explained, the vac hic to Apollonian
Yeah.
kind of state of mind. So I was still kind of in the middle, and still uh, using self destruction as a tool to heighten my consciousness and awareness and all that. So after that, it was this like different other drugs, mostly amphetamines. Mm. And
Easily induced psychosis.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Amphetamines are pretty evil in that. I've seen some bad shit happen to people because of them. But the funny thing is that I've realized that that experience, that kind of psychedelic experience, at least the one that I've achieved from acid, it could be induced by other drugs as well, and that was like that was amazing. I never expected that to happen, and the deepest, the most profound experience was with those drugs. And then afterwards, even when I stopped, like it continued happening when I was meditating, when I was doing yoga. So it kind of went like that. And then the meditations, they got so fucking deep that I decided, okay, I'm not go not only am I not going, well, I decided actually to do drugs, to not do drugs before that. Then I said I'm not gonna even do meditation anymore, because my body's fucked. My body, I've done so much drugs over the years and shit, and just the attitude towards your health and your well, towards my health and my body, it wasn't very good. So I decided to fix it. And but the thing stayed, all of it stayed. It never went away. And and that's what's amazing about it. It's like getting a visa to Mars. Like you peek through it for a bit, and you're like amazed at all that you see, at how different all of it is, and then you get back, but that stays with you.
Mate,
So
I mean, you know, I've had experiences like this. I can really agree with you entirely. I was like, what, like 11 or 12 the first time I took DMT, so like it's quite hard to
for
become a
real.
normal person after that. Yeah.
Jesus.
But this is something I find to be, this is actually what I am the most upset about when it comes to postmodernism and the interaction with postmodernists, is the denial of the transcendent like reality of humans. It's like
You
that
know
which is
what's worse?
transcendent is unchangeable.
I think it's more than that. I think it's like they've achieved an intellectual understanding of of a transcendent way of viewing the world. I mean, at least Bataille has, and some of the other postmodernists. They pretty much said most of the shit that like the way that they dislike binary oppositions is pretty much what the all of the mystical teachings of the world have said way back in the day.
Yeah.
And uh, it's really weird that on an intellectual level they understand that, but on a holistic level, in terms of the way of living and all of that, uh, they they don't see the mystical approach, the occult, the esoteric, as a way of fulfilling
Mm.
that which they thought intellectually to be supreme to the
That's
Aristotelian
interesting.
Newtonian way of viewing the world.
It's also like a sort. It's almost like sort
Yeah,
of
and it's
Milton's.
really weird. I don't get it, to be honest.
Well, have you read Paradise Lost? Huh?
No, I haven't yet.
So in Paradise Lost, obviously, Satan or Lucifer represents the intellect of mankind. Is the only thing that is beneath God, and is the highest thing. And Lucifer gets erected to the highest point and falls down. And it's this concept that human intellect, when you believe that you are capable through your intellect of understanding everything and of creating a worldview, and then you will fall and tumble and burn, and everything will
You think
collapse.
that's the issue?
I think, well, with what you're talking about, because I see what you're talking about in the doctrine itself. When I was again, it was I think it was some interpretation of Foucault, or it was Foucault himself, but they were talking about this sort of like, it's difficult because it's not the transcendent, but it's I could liken it almost to the Buddhist view of consciousness, whereby matter is the creation of consciousness. Consciousness is a phenomena of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously I come from the position that it's not at all. It's something that precedes matter, precedes the brain, like as such. Like I'm a panpsychist. I'm not like I don't hide that shit. I think there's like proto consciousness in pretty much everything. I think that's one of the only logical ways of explaining it, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
when you start to build more complex methods of, it's like radios, you know. That's a terrible analogy, but it's like you have this field that is ever pervasive. You build a radio that can tune into it, and then that's what you get. But that radio can only produce that which it's mechanically able to produce from it. I think that the human brain is just like that. You know, you can only have the experience that you're biologically capable of having, despite the
Yeah.
fact that the phenomena of experience itself is immaterial and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
separate to that biological substrate. Whereas I think for the postmodernists, they recognize the inherent reality of and subjective nature of consciousness and of like awareness in that sense, but then they
Mm-hmm.
come at it from this way of it's still like a sort of production of the of the biological substrate of the brain, but in that sense it is it's really embodied intellect and it's ego. And that's why I find that a lot of the egoists are postmodernists, because they'll go,
Mm-hmm.
right, well, I now have this thing, there's nothing higher than what I have, therefore I create, and I will create the narrative and reality. It becomes a very damning thing. It's almost like a gatekeeper, sort of like
Mm-hmm.
you show people that there's something more, and then you feed them this bullshit to keep them trapped there.
Oh, that reminded me of Franz Kafka. You remember his metaphor with the gatekeeper of law?
Mm.
But I think it's deeper than that, because well, that's definitely one of the reasons that that's happening. But I've met it's very strange, but I met a person that had all the typical traits of a postmodern, like cloudy guy, but at the same time he had a transcendental experience, and he did psychedelics and all that shit, and he had um a more or less accurate understanding of the nature of that metaphysical reality of the quantum reality that we're living in. Well, that isn't obviously self-evident, but
Well, it should, fucking should be, but interestingly enough, I have this book here. This is the Secret of Light by Walter Russell.
uh-huh.
Walter Russell was a contemporary of Nikola Tesla. I'll read the description of him. Walter Russell, from 1871 till 1963, was an artist, sculptor, musician, architectural designer, philosopher, scientist, engineer, etc., etc., etc. He developed a philosophically and spiritually based science, according to this. So anyway, in this book, he basically lays out his physics for the universe being just the mind of God, and everything within the universe merely being a spectrum of light.
Hinduism. That the universe,
yeah, very much so,
is the
very much so.
of Brahma.
Yeah, very so. Like, but this goes. He wrote his own sort of like Bible called the Divine Iliad, but he was a Christian, and a lot of his stuff was sort of it was very much. This is why, again, I would consider him to be like fundamentally a traditionalist, a perennialist, because it's like the sort of you're seeing the truth that is inherent in all these philosophies and all these views, because it is a never-ending truth. But so I don't know how well you can actually see that picture if I hold it up. But so he's got this diagram there, which essentially is from the one comes these dichotomies, and they're polarized. So there's only two forms. You have the positive and the negative, and they become out of balance.
He was also a painter.
What was that?
He was also a painter, musician, and a builder.
Yeah, a sculptor. He built his own house and stuff, like a huge mansion.
Wow, that's amazing.
He was like, yeah, he was really like he's like a sort of lesser known genius of the 20th century. But he also
one of those rare Homo universalis.
He laid out a lot of really important concepts for physiochemistry and like physics and chemistry in itself. And he designed his own periodic table, which predicted the discovery of the pre-hydrogen elements, which we have now discovered. But yeah, so it's like it's full of like just really like interesting like diagrams and explanations.
Interesting.
And he went into like this 4 or 5 day long like epiphany experience, sort of spiritual transcendent experience, and wrote all this stuff down. Anyway, so in his like philosophy. Pardon?
Oh, no mind. Go on.
So in his philosophy, you have everything that comes from the one, and the one becomes conditioned into two, which become out of balance and will eternally strive to get back into balance. And in chemistry, we see this just in the periodic table of elements, how elements interact with each other. It's literally what you have there. You have these elements which are out of balance, and one is out of balance by -1, one's out of balance by +1, so we'll come together and form a new being that is at, well, not a being, but a new structure that is at balance. And so that's something that remains true throughout reality. Like at every aspect of reality, you have this truth of diametrically opposed pressure mediation. And so he viewed human sexual interaction like that as well. And it was a very
sexual interaction.
Yeah, so it's like, so when you have the male and female interacting in like sort of alchemical marriage, you have the perfect balance of being, and like you end up with this extrapolation from then on. Anyway, I thought that was quite interesting that I had that sat there. I just started to reread it.
I'm not sure if I'll be able to find him. Well,
I don't think
here, but that is interesting.
There's a limited amount of like prints, and it's from like the 1920s.
Well, hopefully I'll find it like in an electronic version.
Yes,
maybe.
Yeah.
It will be. We'll see. Well, it's up to the universe really. If I am needed to read this book at this particular moment, then it'll present an opportunity for me to.
Bullshit. Go and get the fucking book. I'll just sit here, man. It'll come to me. Like that. Well,
But yeah,
it's interesting.
as I was saying, about
Sorry, yeah.
that guy. No, it's fine. It's fine. You know that it's fine. Like that's what happens when such such discussions occur. Um, yeah. So it was really weird that a person at the same time could have a like a transcendental understanding of the world and yet be a nebulizing typical postmodernist that couldn't like that. It's as if actually it's the same thing. It's the ego again because he had that experience. Like I had that first as well when I only started doing yoga and practice all of that shit. Because you suddenly start feeling, oh shit, I'm so spiritual. Oh my god, and you,
I
and,
am the
and you,
one.
and you think that you're so better than everyone else in the world. And even if you don't think that to yourself directly, it's kind of crawls into your mind like subconsciously and how you treat people. It took me quite a while to actually get rid of that because I felt a really strong disdain towards people,
Yeah.
like really fucking strong contempt. Like I couldn't literally for a long time I couldn't like walk in the streets without disgust at looking at people. And well, why I'm saying that is because uh, why am I saying that? Um, because he assumed himself to be at that, even though he had a glimpse of that experience, he assumed himself to be at that height of consciousness. So he rejected all of the previous ideas that are known to mankind, and he just like contemptuously says that like it's no point, and well to himself, I assume subconsciously, it's no point even like getting deeper in that. Well, probably after my talk with him, which I like bit after bit told him how he's wrong in that. Like that's not the correct way to view the world. That's not the correct way to approach
I think we
any
should call this
particular
the one world.
paradigm or discourse. That's not the right thing to do because you. But yeah, he he just sort of rejected it, and he found a shelter, a really nice kind of cozy place that he could return to anytime, and not in the good way because like in the good way you have your transcendental inner thingy that you can return to, and it makes you um, invulnerable to the difficulties of life in general, of the like I don't know average kind of difficulties that everybody faces. But he used that as a way um, to make life easier. So instead of actually grasping intellectually and analyzing and really fucking studying shit, he just it's like everything has a right to exist. Yeah, kind of like that. There's basically saying the same shit. Like there's infinite amount of interpretations, but in a more obviously simpler way. And obviously, and you know what's funny? He was he was 34, I think, and he didn't know what the word postmodernism is. He heard it for the first time. Do you imagine that? And
He's like,
that just
and
shows.
I'm this. I
And
thought
that
I
just
created this.
that just shows how strongly, like how subconsciously that ideology, and it is an ideology, even though it's mostly against. Not it doesn't propose too much. Well, it does, but not too much. So that just shows how much it influences people and like the normal people, average people that don't even know what that is. That don't even know that there's like modernism, postmodernism, like enlightenment and all that shit. They're not too culturally educated. So yeah. Uh, so in that respect, what I want to say is that psychedelic or transcendental experience is definitely if you're not living in a monastery, okay, that yeah, even then if you're living in a monastery you're gonna study logic. Buddhist monks know that shit. They study logic really hard. But if you're living in this world, in this Western European world, you can't get away from it. You have to know this shit because, well, as Jung said, um, if you don't know shit, you'll most likely be forced to live a tragedy.
Yep.
And
Yeah. It's like you live a
Yeah,
story and you might as well know what that story is because it might be
yeah,
a
yeah,
tragedy and you
yeah.
might not want it to be. I preferred your version though. There's shit's gonna happen, man. But no, it's very true. So like in my sort of theory of cultures as organisms, uh, it's of the utmost importance that you understand what the sort of the substructure of your culture is, because that's what you are as an individual. All your individual identities are only embodied collective identities. That's all they are.
And I think
So
it's important.
when you live in this a culture that has already become well has been seeded with the ideas of postmodernism and that like even like modernism, whatever it is, you know, you're going to be absorbing that whether you know it or not, and you're going to be analyzing it, you're going to be integrating it and returning it back to the culture as a body. And it's this it's these sort of positions of absolute ignorance, like abject ignorance of that which you are. And it really is, it's like that knowledge of self. It's like, well, you have to have an understanding of where you're coming from, you have to have an understanding of the group that you're a part of, you have to have an understanding of the culture that you embody, all these things before you can really understand it. And then but I find it hilarious when you get these just the inherently arrogant people who have like these somewhat transcendent experiences, and then take from that, it's like, oh, I'm super spiritual, man, super spiritual.
Yeah, but
And
the thing is,
all you're
they,
doing is
they, they don't
validating your already preconceived notions, which is what you claim to be fighting against, and I find that hilarious. Anyway, continue.
But the thing is, they don't even see it that way. They don't even think that they view themselves that way. And it's really, and that's what
That is
postmodernism
in
really
itself
is.
like a fucking example of it. Like, oh,
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Because it's
when I was talking about the Anglo-Saxon individualism, and I'll just say this really quickly because it makes me laugh so much. When you get these like the anti-racists, who it's like, to me, I find it so hilarious because I'm looking at what are a group of Anglo-Saxons who, for the entirety of their history, thought they were like superior to
something's with your
everything.
microphone.
Is it just quiet? I'm just too far away.
No, it's got like a noise. It's noisy.
How are we doing now?
That's better.
Okay, cool. I'm kind of balancing my computer on top of my power supply, so that might be affecting it. But no, so you have these the sort of Anglo-Saxon culture, which forever like thought itself superior racially, culturally, religiously, everything. And you have these individuals who are direct embodiments of that culture. That those are their behaviors, right? And I just have this image of this guy going around like, we're the best, we're the most superior, we do everything better. And then someone goes, listen, yeah, you're being really racist, and it's not cool to be racist. They're like, oh, it's not. Well, we're the least racist. Look how not racist we are. Jesus Christ, man. And it's actually more dangerous now that you're in that position, because it's like this,
Yeah.
when you incorrectly think that you can logically come to a position, it's like, no, you have no control over your beliefs, and you reason back from them. You come up with reasons to have your beliefs. You don't reason to them. And that's when you think that you're a logical being, that's when you're more dangerous, because you think that your irrational positions are rational. So anyway, please
And
continue.
it's especially more dangerous in the hegemony of rationalism. The idea that it's the supreme way of navigating through life and approaching any problem in general.
And that is Anglo-Saxon supremacy. That's exactly what it is. It's like, this is our way, so it's the only way, and it's the best way. It's like, Jesus Christ, man. It's maybe it is for you guys. It is for Anglo-Saxons. It's the best way. Yeah, most definitely. I don't deny that. Like, I don't deny that at all. But let everybody else be themselves, man. What's your beef?
Okay, so.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of took you away.
Oh no. That was perfectly fine.
I wanted to ask, because I have only really read the meta-modern philosophies, the articles and stuff that you've sent to me. I haven't delved into it very far. But would you call yourself like a proponent of meta-modern philosophy, or like an admirer?
Well, to a certain degree.
Okay, cool. So if we are to take you for this like episode as the sort of ambassador for metamodernism, how do you see metamodernism relating to the?
Well, I'll put it this way. I'm probably one of the closest that you'd get to modernists, because most of the meta-modernists that I've encountered, they're not different than postmodern guys. They just found a fancy word to classify themselves, and they it's just intellectual masturbation for them.
All right, cool. So, so then my question would be, how do you see metamodernism relating to all these issues that we've just been talking about postmodernism, and how it would relate to postmodernism as like a phenomena of culture?
Well, it's essentially a new way of approaching any type of problem, any discourse, any idea, and well, metamodernism believes that there are narratives, and there are viable narratives, and it's sort of romantic in its intrinsic nature. And if you have you looked at the art in the article?
Which one?
Give me a sec. I'll open it.
I still haven't read the critique of Peterson and Pagalia.
Oh, I mean, you don't really have to read that. It's quite big.
And Jack Lacan a prophet. I can't get past that line. I'm just like,
the what?
Is in the beginning of the critique. He says he quotes the Prophet Muhammad, and then he says, and then our other prophet Jacques Lacan said this. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Lacan is an idiot. Like,
Okay. And this, is there a chat here where I can send it?
You can send it to me on Facebook if that's.
Yeah. Okay. I'll do that.
I have my phone next to me, so. Sorry, I muted my mic because I was.
Yeah, you just scroll down a bit, and you'll see the metamodern painting. It's basically it's postmodern in the way that it plays out, like the grand narratives, but it's not afraid to do so. It's not nihilistic in that, although it does portray some quite disturbing things. But I mean, I don't think that makes it postmodern.
I think I did read this article. It looks very familiar to me. Just some examples of metamodern art.
Oh, did you show it to the viewers?
Yeah. So from my sort of like I'm a traditionalist, and that's my sort of school of philosophy.
Well, so am I, but I mean, like in terms of approaching culture, and I think metamodernism can easily integrate with traditionalism, and it's
very much so.
It probably doesn't even know that it's doing that.
When you first sent me that article about metamodernism, I was reading this and I was like, is this what I am? And I just think I'm a traditionalist. Like that's literally how I felt. I was like, because it seems like kind of what I feel like I'm doing a lot of the time. Then like I probably said this in the last conversation, but I feel like traditionalism is a protection and a validation of the narratives that we evolved naturally. And metamodernism is the realization of the necessity of narratives and attempts to sort of reconstruct them from observing traditional narratives. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, traditionalism is a structure. It's the house that you build in, and metamodernism is how you I don't know, how you decorate it, how you make it more beautiful, how you make it more interesting.
Okay, interesting. So I would have looked at it a little bit more along the lines of like traditionalism is nature itself, and metamodernism is like a form of engineering predicated upon the observation of nature and natural laws.
I guess
a lot around reconstruction, but it doesn't appear to be. From what I'm not familiar enough with the literature to make any type of like statements about it, but from what I've seen, it appears to be like it would look at Christianity and say that Christianity is. It wouldn't again because if if metamodernists were traditionalists, they would just be traditionalists. So it's like it's if you take Christianity to be inherently valid, then why aren't you a Christian? Whereas, like, so for metamodernism, I feel as though it looks at Christianity as an example and takes from it the aspects of it which are valid in a sort of like sociobiological sense, not in like in a sense that they're like religiously true, and then tries to build a new narrative based on
Have
the
you heard
other
of
structure.
Robert Anton Wilson?
Anton Wilson? No, I have not.
Robert Anton Wilson.
No, I have not.
He was oh, you can look him up. He was quite an interesting guy. He was a scientist, a psychedelic user, and like all that. So he was like in the same like group of people as Terence McCanney and Timothy Leary, so kind of like that. And he developed this concept of quantum psychology, which essentially validates a sort of agnosticism on a quantum level towards any belief, any system of belief, any point of view. But at the same time, it makes like because of that you view everything. You can oscillate between every paradigm, every way of thinking.
This
and
metamodernism.
that doesn't mean that all of them like because there's an infinite amount of interpretations that there's no valid one, and that out of that you could construct a new, uh, a more powerful, a more intellectual one, a more hybrid one, a more cosmopolitan one, I guess.
So it's very interesting to me because and again I jumped quite deep into like perennial philosophy and like traditionalism, but contained within perennial philosophy is this idea that at any given moment you will require a different sort of combination of knowledge, and so it is your duty then as a traditionalist to create a synthesis of tradition that is adequate for that fulfills your need like currently in the moment.
Mm,
And
mm, yeah.
traditionalism is like in no way opposed to evolution in any way, shape, or form. It like sees that like evolution is fundamental. There's a fundamental aspect to reality that like if sort of old school Catholic doctrine was still useful, then the Protestant Revolution would never have happened. You know, the mere fact that the Protestant Revolution happened like is serves to validate the whatever Luther's was it 98 issues with the church or whatever it was, or issues with Christianity. And in that sense, it to a certain degree sort of validated New Age thinking and New Age philosophy, which was much to its detriment.
Well, the problem with New Age thinking and with psychedelics in the 60s in general was that it just showed how, well, not only that people weren't ready for all that, but also that some knowledge should be hidden for the better of for the health of other humans, for the mental health especially, because like the shit that the shit that I've seen and that I've experienced, even for me it was like, even for me as a person that was always kind of attracted, well, you know, like when we would go and do shit. I mean, and
we had fun. Let's just leave it at that.
And even for me, like being a person that was generally kind of attracted to that, and obviously, if there wasn't that factor, I'd probably not do all that shit. But for someone that has like nothing, that doesn't have a proclivity for those kind of things, that doesn't have the predisposition for the deeper, the occult understanding of life, it will be a very frightening experience that can be a very tough existential burden for him for the rest of his life, and that's what happens to a lot of people that take like LSD, that aren't ready for it. Some of them commit suicide, others that they end up in psychiatric thingies.
So here's a very interesting thing from psychology that is something you probably find quite interesting. Post-traumatic stress disorder is typically characterized by naivety. So someone will enter into a situation where they are naive, like completely naive of reality, and they'll become, or they'll interact directly with someone who is malevolent. So there was one story of a girl. Yeah, I think it's probably from Peterson, but it might be from Sapolsky. Of this girl whose boyfriend like attacked her, and she her whole life didn't like thought that people were inherently good, and that people who were evil were just crazy, just like schizophrenic or whatever. And then she then interacted with this person who, in their eyes, wanted nothing more but to hurt her and to extract pleasure from that. And she had no way of integrating an understanding or the experience of having a person or interacting with a person like that into her or her morality, her understanding of morality. She didn't have a good moral philosophy, and that resulted in post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's where a lot of PTSD comes from. It comes from naivety and not having a philosophy that can fully integrate these experiences. So the observation that people who interact directly with chaos and are not prepared for it will go crazy is a fundamentally true observation, and it's testified to by PTSD as an example here.
So why were we talking about this?
We were talking about
how did we digress to this?
We were talking about psychedelic experiences and metamodernism and the
oh right, yeah.
So it's like, and keeping knowledge hidden. So I would fundamentally agree with you that there are certain aspects of knowledge which need to be revealed to you by someone who is themselves initiated. And again, we see this all throughout history: the initiation, and the initiation was always always a verbal thing. It was never written down.
And also, the initiation is deeply ingrained in art as an archetypal form of how the hero travels to some place and he symbolically dies, and well, you know the rest.
Of course,
it's it's very, and especially like in our culture, we have so much of the initiation in our folklore. Well, it's hidden. It's symbolic.
Our entire culture comes from initiation and the sacredness of knowledge and things like this. That's why we value intellectuals so much now. They've told us that it must be true. It has to be. Like, well, that comes directly from so the Druid schools in Britain. You know, it used to take something like 25 years to become a Druid. It's like, wow, people come from all over the world. It's like, well, what the fuck were you learning that it took 25 years for you to be prepared to have that understanding? Shit. You see it all throughout like Greek philosophy and Persian philosophy, Hindu philosophy, all that there is, and this very much in the Hindu caste system. You have this idea that you will only have a certain amount of people who are able to have that knowledge and have that understanding.
Yeah.
And that is somehow
the Brahma caste.
Exactly, but that's somehow connected to your biology, which I think is fundamentally true. But this is like cultures as organisms. So like each human within the culture will play the role of an organ, you know, to maintain its survival. So you'll have like warriors and priests and educators, etc., etc.
Yeah, but nowadays, like, that hierarchy has become what's it called? I know the Russian word.
What's the Russian word?
Well, so let's say suppressed.
Yeah.
I mean, and the way I see it, actually, there's been an involution of the caste, because,
to quote Evola.
Oh, did he? Yeah, he did.
Word, yeah. The involution of the caste system.
but that's how it is, because when we got to the aristocrats as the elite, that's basically the Kshatris. That's the third caste. And then from the aristocrats, that's the we have the bourgeoisie. That's the second caste. That's almost the lowest one. That's the second one to the lowest. And well, you see what happened after that
And then
to
we're
art and
beneath
to
that, we're
everything in
untouchable.
general. Yeah, and when we got to the lowest, to the well, in Russia, in Soviet Union, and what's it called in Sanskrit? Uh, Kshatri, Shudra.
Mhm.
I think it's Shudra. So it's like the majority of people, the people that work with their hands, that are laborers. That's what we had in Russian communism, and well, I think it's pretty self-evident where that leads to. And
Yeah.
I mean, you can argue that there is obviously a progress, but I think you English guys have this. I forgot what his name was. He uh, he claimed that history is literally made by the greats, and like that's essentially it's only the greats that move history. And that's probably
Wait, that history is written by the victors, or that society is pulled up from the top and not pushed up from the bottom. So they're two different people.
hmm?
So is that history is always written by the victor?
No.
Okay, so
Uh,
it's the idea that society is always pulled up from the top and never pushed up from the bottom.
no, not that. Well, basically, he said that history, well, in general, civilization has um, has been uh, has been developing only through the input of great people, like really great people, the greats of the greats. They're
Yeah,
the main
this
movers.
the society is pulled up from the top. Like Alexander the
Oh,
Great, yeah, get to the top and then lift everybody else up by virtue of being there. And it's never pushed up from the bottom. It's never like the communist revolution, the proletariat that lifts society and raises history up to the next epoch. It's always pulled up from the top by singular individuals.
yeah,
But that
and
specific quote was Milton Friedman, the capitalist economist.
yeah, he was like 19th century or something, right?
No, Friedman was. Oh, no, he wasn't. He was 20th century. He was sort of
Oh, then that's probably a different guy. But anyway,
1930s. I'm trying to work out who you're talking about because that's
never
just,
mind, never
I
mind.
should know.
Those that are interested, I mean, I have him in like somewhere in my computer. Like
Mm.
I save like a lot of people that I'll come back to, like because like when you're reading shit, you tend to come up to like. Mm, you tend to encounter loads of different, I don't know, writers, authors, whatever, and you don't have the time to, as soon as you encounter them, to read them straight away. You have to put them for later. But anyway,
Yeah.
why I said that was like it's to an extent I think that is correct, but ultimately, in spite of that that progress, we have um a regress as well because the hierarchies are well, being slowly forgotten and forgotten. We, because of our uh, constructed human morals that we've decided suddenly to help the whole world, help all the people, but we can't even help ourselves. I mean, I'm talking about like the intellectuals that thought of this. We've
Secular Christians,
hmm?
the secular Christians,
Yeah.
like the humanists.
Yeah, we've come to the point where we've we've sort of made the world degrade on a spiritual level, on an aesthetic level, because I mean, with the aristocrats leading the world, I think that wasn't too bad because they're kind of born leaders,
Mhm.
and as long as like the priests, the brahmans, they were someone there influencing. I mean, that's fine. But when it got to bourgeoisie, man, it straight away hit him. It straight away hit the world, and Balzac, Honoré de Balzac,
Mhm.
he was one of the first, and also Gustave Flaubert. He was one of the first to notice how is starting to corrupt men and life in general. And those were, well, it initially started in France. Obviously, they were going to be the first, but you have to understand that France was always the epicenter of culture and art in general. But and you suddenly, well, what's interesting, you suddenly reach a point where those two worlds of art and the world, they have started to separating, and the modernist writers, they couldn't be understood by, I don't know, an average person. They were incomprehensible,
Mhm.
simply because they supposedly dealt with two Empyrean kind of things, two Empyrean issues, and you had to have like such a wide cultural background just to understand what the guy is talking about. Like, why the fuck do I need that? I just wanna, I don't know, play cards, read newspapers, go to the theater once in a while.
Which are perfectly valid endeavors.
Yeah, they're perfectly valid as long as you don't, as long as that's not the only life that you're living. But yeah, what I'm saying is, I think that hierarchical society of tradition is in its nature not the best one,
Hmm.
not the best one possible.
Hmm.
And I actually think that communism at one day might just be possible. But oh boy, that will be it will be a very, very long time till we reach that, trust me. Very, very long. And for the well being, I think we should go back to what has worked for like a few thousand years and worked like great, worked perfect. Well, I mean, perfect to an extent, because essentially you have like the 60%, 60, 70% laborers that are doing the like hard and not so very fun work.
Mm. Well, I do agree with you, and I do agree with the fact that the vast majority of traditional hierarchies were quite pathological. You know, it was quite,
Yeah.
and it again, it's dependent on the way in which you view things, because there's to a certain degree the violent and the directly oppressive nature is
Just give
valid
me a
to
sec.
the person himself. What was that?
Oh wait, never mind. Go
So,
on.
yeah, to the person who is becoming, again, this is like the Nietzschean perspective. It's like the
Mhm.
will to power, like the mere fact that I have the will to power validates my power. It's
Mhm.
like, and that influence had quite. You saw this in the Hindu caste system, especially where, um, like the Hindu caste system used to be era. It was predicated upon birth, but it wasn't concrete. So like you had untouchables becoming
Yeah.
Brahma all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
becoming yogis, because if that's what you are, then that's what you are. It's like your
Yeah.
status of
It's
birth means nothing.
only later did it turn out to be something rigid. Initially, it wasn't.
Yes, and it was specifically when I can't remember which dynasty it was, but it was some dynasty that invaded and occupied. I don't think they were native Indians, but they made it that so our children for all eternity will hold this position. It's, like, it's never like that before. It's like you see even
Hmm.
in the Germanic
And that's
system.
why I think that's why Buddha criticized the Vedas, because
Mm,
they were interpreted wrongly.
very much so, very much so, and that type and
And he was a
it's like
kshatri. He was a kshatri that essentially became a brahman.
mm. And again, so it's like exact evidence for it. There's like, and you'll see that most Hindus will still, even traditionalist Hindus who believe in the caste system, will still acknowledge that Buddha as a Brahma and as a priest and as an incarnation of Vishnu. Right? It's like the seventh or
Okay,
eighth
give me a second.
manifestation of Vishnu. Yeah, no worries. But so it's a very like when you have society set up in a hierarchical structure of, well, it's not really inherent value more as it is value of occupation. So you have your priests at the very top, and the priests are not people who are living in vast material wealth. So they are the best people to have on the top in that sense. But only you can only really have that in a culture which is like India is truly spiritual. Like, and that's a ridiculous way of phrasing it, but you have a truly reflective population there. So if you go to India, it was I think it was Sadhguru who said that if you go to India, you'll find whatever you're looking for. If you're looking for enlightenment, you'll find it. But if you're looking for just another person to validate your current flaws, you'll find that as well. India's full of con artists and priests who are con artists. But you can think of it almost in like a sort of capitalist way of the it's the market of ideas, like the free market of ideas will select for these people to be there. So we are very like, it's very typical for us to think about this in Western European sense, again in sort of Anglo-Saxon sense, but more so in a Western European sense, where we look at the actions of Catholic priests molesting young children, and we look at the sort of horrific behaviors that the Christian churches, once the Christian priest system had become quite pathologized and had been given like a sort of a status of absolute power and freedom from criticism, which no priest was free from criticism in India. No Brahmo was free from criticism, or free from being challenged. And so you had this situation of this truly almost like anarchistic develop, and that's why you know the hierarchy itself was valid, because it evolved anarchistically. And I do truly believe that if you remove all artificial structures of society and all enforced structures, that natural hierarchy will just manifest itself, because that's what is natural for humans. And I believe it will manifest in a way that is very close to what the Hindu system was, because I think that's how the Hindu system came into being. I think that's how it started. It started from a very anarchistic position. But so don't fall into the trap of looking at Hindu priests in the same way as you would look at Christian priests and saying, oh, well, these people shouldn't be at the head of our society because they're evil and they want to molest little children. It's like, well, in India, if you're behaving like that, that would invalidate your position as a priest to begin with. But and again, it is very much like a free market of ideas that you have over there. But I do fundamentally believe that like society is striated in that manner. I think this is because cultures will create the people they need to have, And I think if you have like a group of 10 or 15 people who are unspecialized, as like I'm not sure if that's the right word, but to just like sort of 10 or 15 average people, and you drop them on a desert island, they will soon fall into the positions that are required. You'll have like a few hunters, you'll have like an organizer at the top, you'll have like
Lord of the Flies.
Oh, yeah. I think it will go a little bit better than that, but people will fall into the positions that are required. And I think that the Hindu system is a good example of that. I think it's all biologically mediated, and I think it can be explained perfectly rationally through biology. But that's just me.
Okay.
So I think we've covered that pretty well. Should we talk a little bit about Dugan?
Dugan.
Because I don't know, man.
I just want to make sure that we cover postmodern, because I think I want to say something else about it.
Please do, man. If you have anything else to say, it's just like I've been talking about this topic for fucking ages.
Oh, I want to ask you about political correctness, because I don't see it like in my vicinity in everyday life, and you, well, obviously because you live in England, you'll have more of that. I mean, I assume that's not like America. America is like absolutely crazy in that. From what I gather.
We are just little America. That's all. Britain is just little America. That's all we are.
Yeah, I know, but still it should be. Well, anyway, just tell me about it.
Well, it's so if you take for example my university, and like I'm not going to name the university.
Oh, and tell me about the university thing, because from what I hear, like it's really like there's really a lot of it in universities for some reason.
Well, 100%. We had see, this could fuck me up, because I'm not gonna like name my university, but then I'm gonna start talking about like influential and famous philosophers who talk there. Okay, well, so all right, so we used to have.
Wait, for real?
What?
Will it like?
Well, no, just from me naming these philosophers, like you'll be able to work out what university is, so it's fine. So we have Slavoj Zizek is the head of humanities for my university. Do you know Zizek?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like I had these synchronicities with him. The universe was really asking me to read them soon, but I still haven't read anything of him.
I tell you, man, like Papa Z, I have a lot of love for him. Like he's still a filthy communist, modernist, and all this stuff, but he's anti-political correctness. I have a lot of respect for him. You know, I respectfully disagree with him on issues, but I have a lot of respect for him. So he's the current head of humanities at my university. The other person we used to have was Roger Scruton. Ooh, is the mic okay?
Scruton?
Yeah, Scruton. Do you know who that is?
No.
He's a conservative philosopher, and quite an influential one in the sphere. But he no longer is at my university, and I don't know exactly why. But I think it's of course to do with his like positions, because now every single person, every single member of the philosophy faculty is left wing. To some degree, and he was the only like vaguely right wing person who was there, and he's like not there. And now Slavoj Zizek has a postmodernist, and communist is the head of humanities. But so like there are every teacher that I have come into contact with at my university is either politically apathetic or left wing, like. And even those who are politically apathetic are just sort of kowtowing to the other people, because the other people are very loud and will take their jobs away. When it comes to students, the overwhelming majority are like sort of social justice type people. But I have to say that I've been the way in which our university is divided on our campus, we have 3 different colleges, and my college is like the college of like hard sciences, pretty much. So we have. Philosophy is the least hard of the sciences that we have at my university, or at my college specifically. But then we have another college which is a purely social science, like Frankfurt School of cultural marketing. It's not an overused term, but that's really like a Frankfurt School, and they have like Marxist societies and all this sort of stuff. And if you walk onto my university campus, before you even walk in through the gates to the campus, everywhere will be socialism 2017, how socialism can save us, why communism was fine, come to this thing about the Russian Revolution and see why it saved the world. And it's like, well,
for real?
Honestly, it's like I was having an argument with somebody who didn't realize that. Yeah, seriously. And we have like free education demos. The current like president of the student body is like an Antifa. All this stuff. Again, most of the students that I interact with are not like that at all. Like they're much more would be able to have these sort of conversations. But that's of course not the overwhelming majority. And to see what the aesthetic is, the aesthetic is primarily one of political correctness and like social justice activism, etc., etc. But I was having a conversation with someone who. I was waiting in line to get some free food from the Hare Krishna people, and this guy was handing out leaflets for a talk on why the communist revolution was incredible and amazing and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, you can have your propaganda back, my bro. He started like screaming at me, like, it's not propaganda, and all this bullshit. And I was like, well, so I started saying to him, I was like, I supported the Russian Revolution, just not the one that you did. I was like, the first one I was all down with, that was all good, man. But it was when the Bolsheviks came in, like a year later, like a couple like months later, and fucked it up for everybody. That was fine, but he didn't even know about that. He didn't even know that there was a genuine like.
Of course, he didn't know.
Genuinely evolutionary revolution that happened in Russia, and everything would have actually been quite good if that had been allowed to happen. And then.
You mean the one at 1905?
Again, not an expert on it, so I don't want to start giving data, but I would imagine so.
Well, is the first October Revolution that you're saying?
I think I'm probably referring to the first October Revolution. So it was not the Bolshevik government, but the government that was the Bolsheviks disposed, and I think it was the first democratic vote, and I can't remember the name.
It's prior to the division of the of the communists. Well, of the Marxists. I don't think they were communists at that point. Well,
But it was Lenin. It was
what?
when Lenin took over.
Yeah, well, on the second revolution, like the after the second revolution, they divided into the reds and the whites, and the whites were the guys that were against the fucking violence and because the Bolsheviks they killed really a lot of people and they killed a lot of aristocrats. They hunted them down and like it was pure madness. They didn't want to do that. They,
Yeah.
the whites they wanted the revolution to happen peacefully.
But so to my, I'm gonna look like a knob now, being like, I was telling this guy all this stuff, and I don't even like know it all myself. But like, it's like to my understanding, there was
Nonetheless,
a relatively peaceful revolution that happened. It was like it was a vote or something along those lines. The Bolsheviks lost the vote, and this other party took. It's gonna really piss me off that I can't remember the name of them, so I'm gonna try and find it. And then after that, the Bolsheviks were in Germany, and then they came back in and illegally, but like violently overthrew the democratically elected government and instituted the communist dictatorship. And he knew nothing about this. He thought that it was just Tsarist Russia up until the point that the communists took over and saved everybody.
well, of course he didn't know. I mean, it seems like they just for them it's a way to fill in the existential hole in their hearts in their lives, just to have some idea to fight for, to be a fanatic about.
It
It's
might be
really
the Mensheviks.
disturbing
Yeah, I think it was
that
Menshevik.
people. Hmm?
It's the Mensheviks, huh? Is that right?
Yeah, it is. That's the whites.
Okay. Yeah. So then, the Mensheviks were. Was it the February Revolution then?
Oh, yeah, it seems like it is. Wait. See, my last time I did Russian history, it was 5 years ago. So this is a pretty dim. This is a
I've
pretty dim
never done
recollection.
Russian history.
Well, okay. The first. Oh wait, the Mensheviks uh they rejected to they rejected any any part in the first Russian Revolution, which is 1905. Okay,
And what
so
happened in
it's
1905?
the February Revolution that you talked about. So yeah.
Okay, cool. And then what was the 1905 revolution then?
I don't quite remember, to be honest.
Was it not so
I just remember those two revolutions. Like it didn't succeed, and it was done, I believe, after or prior to the war with Japan, and like Nikolai II, he didn't succeed in that war. It was very bad. He was Oh wait, I think it was actually a bit later. Was it? Okay, like I don't think there's a point in talking about that part of the history of Russia because I haven't refreshed that in quite a while. But if you want to talk about it, I think like we could talk about it next time. Yeah,
Yeah, do another one.
because as I said, it's been 5 years since I've studied Russian history in school, and after that I didn't really go too deep to it. I mean, there's too many other things.
Most of my understanding of it comes from like reading about like czars and stuff like that, and of course that the crazy like new chronology people, like Anatoly Fomenko.
Oh yeah. Well, in terms of the revolution, what I find most interesting is, and we weren't told this in school, is that Dostoevsky in his The Possessed, he well more or less predicted all of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've read it or not, but
I haven't read
it's
The Possessed. No.
No, you've heard it from Peterson, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Well, the book is amazing. It's probably my favorite. Well, I'm kind of it's hard for me to decide between the Karamazov brothers and the Possessed,
As
but
the two that I have read are not War and Peace. That's not the fuck. Crime and Punishment and Brothers Karamazov.
what?
The two that I read are Crime and Punishment and the Brothers Karamazov.
Oh, and how do you like the Karamazov brothers?
I love it, man. It was brilliant. I was having this conversation with my grandfather the other day because I was sort of because he's dying, he's got Parkinson's and stuff, so I was taking him out somewhere. And I was like, "Oh, have you read any good books recently?" He's like, "Oh, The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins. It's so amazing." I'm like, Christ. Jesus Christ, Granddad. So I had to just sit him down and explain all this shit. I'm like, listen, right? He's a mediocre biological scientist. His philosophy is trash. Don't read that shit. It's terrible. He's arguing against the Christianity of a 7-year-old boy. Like, terrible. Have you read The Brothers Karamazov? And he's like, no. Like, well, there you go then.
Wow. And did he read it? Did he go for it?
I'm gonna give him my copy of it next time I see him. So
Wow,
that
is amazing.
If you want to find the best arguments for and against Christianity, that's it. That's it. That is it. It's right there.
Well, I'd put it this way. It's yeah, in a sense, but the Possessed provides a deeper argument against him, in a way.
Against
But
Christianity.
yeah, Brother Karamazov, it's pretty much more or less enough. Like, but my personal favorite, for me, it's just the personal struggle with faith in general and all the fucking existential thingies, even if they're not exactly existent, which was for my case. It's quite funny because I thought I had an existential crisis, but actually I didn't. I just like the aesthetic aspects of it, which is quite hilarious. But in spite of that, in that respect, The Possessed can be a very very deep book. And it's quite interesting because Dostoevsky is not only an author that makes people believe in God, like makes them question, like view that in a new way, but he also makes people question God and make like a lot of people that believed before reading Dostoevsky have stopped believing. That's very paradoxical, isn't it?
No, that's something that's again just the mark of a great mind. But when I was reading Crime and Punishment, man, like as I read it and then I had the audiobook that I was listening to this summer, and like because I've had quite a lot of experiences with like nihilism and with the sort of the belief that you can conduct acts of evil and they will not be evil. It's like I was homeless for quite a long time, and it was like, and so I was interacting with a lot of like, I think even in Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago, he talks about like when you're in a situation like that, the people who are righteous die. Like you're not going to survive. It's like you have to like lower yourself down to this sort of be willing to send somebody else off to die instead of you. You have to be willing to do things like that if you're going to survive. And there was just a bit where he was going to go and kill the old lady, and he's like hiding behind the door. And
yeah, you told me the previous time.
Yeah, so it's like I've had experiences not when I was going to go and kill an old lady, but like when I've been like stealing shit or something like this. And it's like somehow I'm just speaking my way out of it, and I'm not thinking. I'm just like fucking terrified, like I'm being caught, like something horrible is going to happen to me. But it's like no, like these things just come out, and you're able to weave yourself out of it. And I just remember reading it and listening to it, and it's just like. Like, what?
Yeah.
And that was for me a very big realization of because you again it's this sort of egotistical thing that I've come to this position, therefore like I am a genius and this must be the right place to be. When you start reading these classical authors and you realize it's like it was like how many levels of egoism are you on now? It's like I don't know, like 7. Like, you're a small child. Watch this. I would just write a 1,000-page book about these experiences and how they're characteristic of humanity. Damn. It gives you a certain like humbleness, you know?
Yeah, it does. It does. And that's actually what Orwell wrote in his I think his essay is called "Why I Write."
I have not read all
Why I
those
know about
essays.
this? It's quite short, and I'll even send you it now if I still have. I just I happened to translate an article on, well, like his essay was involved. It was mentioned, so I decided to read it.
Mhm.
And he said that initially, like most people, when they approach literature, when they approach art in general, initially they tend to have egotistical motives. They tend to, like, for example, you want to read a book so that you can show off to other people that, oh, I've read this and that, and like, yeah,
Mhm.
and be so like for ostentatious motives, and but then afterwards, the great forces of of aesthetic and spiritual depth, whether you like it or not, that will change how you are and the way you think. And eventually, because of that grandeur that you're constantly facing, you'll understand uh, your puniness,
Mhm.
your and you'll naturally, you'll logically achieve a certain degree of humbleness, and then you'll kind of stand up. Oh, that's interesting because I kind of like it. I like that feeling of humbleness. It's comforting. I feel harmonious with that humbleness. I don't. We haven't talked about Dugan, have we?
I think we'll just have to do an episode on Dugan alone because
Yeah,
it keeps
yeah.
creeping into
I
everything.
think
And talking
that
about.
would be.
Okay, awesome.